Hello, David Kinnan here. The following is a model that I created with the help of my good friend and colleague Patrick Luce. And it's a model of change. If you've ever tried to change a behavior, change a habit, change a life pattern, you probably have noticed that it's not too easy. And most people struggle with change. And this model is our attempt to sort of decode the process of change in working with people. And I've worked with a lot of people. I noticed that sometimes I would work with someone and it would be really simple, really straightforward, and they would change really fast. I remember working with one gentleman and we had planned to do about 8 sessions of coaching. And he came in twice, 2 sessions, and he had achieved all the changes that he wanted to achieve. Yet other times I would work with someone and it didn't really matter what we did, nothing would really change. And so I wanted to understand, what is it that allows some people to change really easily, really quickly? And when someone's not able to change the things they want to change, what's going on? How does that work? Are there patterns? And in exploring this over time, I found that there were patterns. Every time I worked with someone who wasn't able to change, and it didn't matter what the problem was, whether it was something like anxiety or depression or an addiction or a limiting pattern or not being able to achieve the financial success they wanted or other results in performance, I found there were always the same psychological patterns in place in those cases. And the Scripts model is the pattern that outlines what is it that stops people from change. The S is for symptoms, as we get into it here. People don't realize, and of course we never really had any education in this, people don't realize that the mind or our psychology is a system. Often the problems we have are not really the problems, they are the symptoms of underlying problems. And none of us were really trained to differentiate causes and symptoms. If someone is depressed or anxious or has low self-esteem or fear of public speaking, or if they are constantly stuck at the same income level, these are symptoms of something else, and the only way we're going to change is to find what are the real causes. In working with people again and again and again and again, I found that what people think the real problem is really very often just a symptom of the problem. We finally can separate symptoms and causes and start to explore the real underlying causes, which are often hidden from awareness. We start to get somewhere. C is for certainty. People tend to want to hold on to what they know, and often without realizing it. Sometimes people can be in dire straits, they can be feeling really desperate, and consciously they want change, yet as human beings and with the innate survival mechanisms that we came equipped with, we often want to stick to what we know. Virginia Satir, who is one of my idols, I could say, whose work has really inspired me, said that the greatest human motivator is to stick with what's familiar. And I think often when it comes to change, people don't realize that inherent in any process of change, it involves risk. It involves stepping into the unknown and taking that leap. So certainty. Next is resistance. Often people that I worked with will have tried many things. They will have tried therapy of many forms, reading, books galore, coaching sessions, seminars, trainings, and even hypnotherapy. And they get to a point where they realize nothing I've done has worked. And often what I found is that if change is a form of resistance, which it often is. Change often is a way of getting rid of a problem. And when it is a form of resistance, the problem tends to fight back. Now what's really interesting about this is that change is often a form of resistance toward the symptoms of a problem and not even the causes. And if we resist the symptoms persist. For any change to be effective, it's going to have to move beyond resistance of the symptoms and really resolve causes. Next is identification. Identification is a really interesting topic and subject that actually took me a really long time to discover and understand. What I found was that when people have a certain problem or situation for a long time, it's so familiar that we tend to get the sense, well, oh, this is just who I am. If you've been depressed for your whole life, it's going to be really difficult to move beyond that because it's all you know, because it gives you a sense of certainty, and also because you'll just think, well, this is just who I am. These emotions, this is just who I am. I remember working with a woman who wanted to lose weight, and in our sessions one day, she said, this weight, this 200 and some pounds, well, this is just who I am. When we identify with something psychologically, it tends to be fixed in place. It crystallizes in place, and we become a prisoner to it. If you believe at the deepest level that this situation is who you are, then changing it actually implies you have to become someone else. And so it becomes very, very difficult to change. One of the basic ideas of NLP is that we are not our behavior. And it actually is, the purpose of that is to address this idea that whatever we're experiencing, our thinking, our patterns, our behaviors, our results, it's not really who we are. It's just aspects of our experience, and we have to separate the two out in order to be able to change something. P is for pessimism. And what I mean by pessimism is the belief I can't change. Very, very often, if you've struggled with something for a long time, if your efforts have failed, if you've tried and it hasn't worked, the logical conclusion is, well, I guess I'm stuck with this. I can't change. If you feel this is who I am, you're also going to conclude, well, I can't change. And that idea actually has a very interesting effect on your mind and body, because it sort of gives the mind and body a powerful signal to fix things in place, just like identification. If you believe inside that you can't change something, none of your efforts are going to be able to pass through that filter. This idea is actually going to negate anything you do. And so one of the things I wanted to do with people is to explore what they have done, what they have tried, find out maybe what was missing from that approach or what was stopping them, so moving forward they can sort of see what is going to work and what is going to get in the way, and we can kind of undo this idea that change is not possible. Next is thinking. In working with people, I found that very, very often people would have automatic default ways of trying to make changes. And one of the ones that seemed most popular was what I call thinking. People will try to think themselves out of problems. I've got to figure it out. I've got to solve this now. And they will end up trying to rationalize, intellectualize. If someone has learned methods, cognitive methods, even something like NLP, it can lead to, I'm going to sort of disappear inside my head and use NLP to think my way out of this, but that doesn't really work. It's also not the way NLP works. This kind of thing leads to obsession, and when people try to think themselves out of problems, it usually makes it worse. If you think about times when you have tried to solve something with your mind, just take note. Did it really work? Was it really effective? To resolve problems, it's not at the level of conscious, rational, logical thinking that it's going to happen. It's going to be a deeper level of the mind that is not really involving our conscious mechanisms. There is another T, which is time. And what I noticed in working with people was that people might have an objective. They might know what they want to achieve, but in their mind, it was sort of placed really close in time. And so I might say to someone, okay, we've set this goal. Now I want you to tell me, when do you want this? And they would look at me and say, now. Or, I want it yesterday. And whenever we set a goal, the mind actually needs time and space to make changes to align with that goal. If we've placed it in our mind right up close, right quick, in the immediate future, or we sort of placed it in a way behind us, thinking I should have already had this, it actually is going to create a kind of internal pressure system which prevents us from learning, from making changes, from growing, and from developing the resources we need to achieve something. This is one of the reasons why in the NLP well-formed outcome pattern, one of the questions when we set a goal is when? Is it timed? And is this timeline realistic? It needs to be out in the future to give us the space and time to achieve it. In my own life, there's been times when I set a goal and I might have put it in the future 3 months or 6 months, which really gave me this sense of space and time. And what ended up happening when I had that space and time is I achieved it probably 3 times faster than I had really set. But if I had put it up close, let's say out a month or so, it would create a sort of pressure and then I would be stuck. So time. The last one is states. Our states really determine the quality of our life. And people don't tend to realize that often when we want to change states. We want to break limiting states. So things like anxiety, depression, stuckness, these are states of mind, and they will direct and control our thinking, our behavior, our decision making. In working with people, I notice very specific states that get in the way of making changes. One of them is urgency. If you have a problem and the idea in your mind is, I have to solve this now, it also creates a sort of internal pressure, prevents you from getting in touch with resources, creativity, abilities. Another state that stops people is demandingness. This kind of have to, need to, gotta get rid of this now, also creates a sort of pressure. States that are conducive to change are states like curiosity, which the NLP model is based on, patience, letting go, learning state, and if you're familiar with hypnosis, the trance state. Is very conducive to change, which is what is one of the things that makes NLP techniques or hypnotherapy effective. So this is the scripts model, the pieces of human experience that can get in the way of change. And Patrick and I also created a model called the cause model, which is if these are the things that are in the way of change, what needs to be in place for change to occur effectively and be long-lasting. And so you can check out my video on the cause model.